The Synodontis lucipinnis was a much more common and very popular, highly sought-after fish in the freshwater hobby and one of the smallest Synodontis catfish from Lake Tanganyika in Africa. It's sometimes called a dwarf petricola, but it's neither a petricola and it's not a dwarf of anything. It's a hardy, active, fast-moving, social, peaceful fish that will tend to stay in the plants until there is food seen or some type of disruption attracts their attention. They're very slow growing, and though they will eventually reach 3.5 to 4 inches, it can easily take them 2 or 3 years to get there. This fish was once routinely available at your local fish store and is still occasionally seen. It was only in the last 40 or 50 years that this fish was found not to be a parasitic cuckoo type breeder, which I'll explain later, and is in fact an egg scatterer similar to the true petricola. This is also a special line and not found in pet shops. I obtained them about 7 years ago from Colorado University to help the lab figure out how best to breed them, and I obtained 3 pair. The lab had obtained them in the mid-1990s. The lucipinnis is considered to be too difficult or not cost-effective to spawn naturally, so farms breed them often on a schedule a few times a year using chemical methods like hormones and such. And as a result, they're available to pet stores only during a few periods during the year. And many have shared concerns with me that the fish that you're getting in these pet shops, these artificially produced fish, are not as healthy or as colorful as the original naturally bred fish. Here in Colorado, approximately 30 to 40 years ago, there was someone who used to breed this fish and would take orders from pet shops up and down the state along the I-25 corridor, delivering his Synodontis, all bred from his own high-quality stock that he'd obtained. And for many years, most of the lucipinnis in the hobby throughout Colorado were his fish. You can see that they possess a great white coloration of the spines that aren't often seen in the lines today. And I'm also working to develop a high white line with really high contrast black markings, but they won't be available for a while. All of the Synodontis lucipinnis are bred here, and gradual work over 6 years has finally allowed for some slow production. I'm currently putting together a series of videos similar to those done with the Odessa barbs for the lucipinnis over the next few months, and I'll post them on how to breed this fish when they're ready to go. Okay, for the first question today, Robbie asks, "Hey Greg, all the fish are doing great, but I wanted to ask a question about the lucipinnis. They've been here now about 4 months, and the female looks to be full of eggs, but I have not seen any young. What am I not doing right?" The lucipinnis isn't going to be a fish you're going to easily be able to breed like you do with the swordtails and the live bears and such. You can breed them in the home aquarium. I mean, I do it here. But there's a lot of special things you have to do to get them to breed. And then once you've got them to breed, raising the young is not easy. They do breed in the tank. The females are going to fill up with eggs. If you've got a male in there, they will spawn in the gravel, but they eat the eggs and they eat the young up pretty quickly. So the trick comes down to getting the eggs from the adults and getting them to hatch and then raising the young up. So I actually I'm in the process of putting together a series of videos just like I did for the Odessa barbs on how to breed the lucipinnis, or at least how I do it here, and that'll be ready in a couple of months. So until then, there's probably, I mean, unless you really want to make the effort to go ahead and breed them, you can, but and you can write me and I'll give you more information on how to get that started and some simpler ways to do it, but it's not something that's just going to happen by taking good care of them and leaving them alone and looking for fry. So hope that answers the question.
And now Mark asks, can you please help me? Do you know anybody that can repair a tank It's got a crack at the bottom. The spec is the following in centimeters: height 52, width 83, diameter 40. It's an Aqua 850. It's curved glass. Everybody is telling me to get now set up. I don't want to. The tank is only 2 years old, and I just want to keep it. If you could help, I would be very greatly, fully look forward to hear from you. Tanks leaking is something that happens. I mean, it just does. There's nothing. The tanks are a lot better now than they used to be. Here at Select Aquatics, I've got about 120 tanks. I probably run through another 20 or 30. But I was also the manager of the lab at Colorado University for 5 years, and we had 200 plus tanks there. And one thing that the lab at CU had in common with Select Aquatics is that we have all old equipment, old tanks, things that were donated to us, things that I begged, borrowed, to get Select Aquatics started and such. So in the time that I've been getting it going, I've gradually replaced all those old original tanks, and now now I'm at a point where most of those old tanks are gone. However, I would deal with leaking and leaky issues all the time. The kinds of horror stories we've heard about in the past, where a tire seam splits on a glass tank, I don't think those things happen anymore. I haven't heard anything like that in a long time. I had a friend that got a new 55 and had a plug pop out of the front of it after it was filled with fish in it and such, about a week or so after he got it. But those kind of things are like really, really rare, and it just like never happens. When you get a leak, it's usually going to be around the bottom, and the reason for it is twofold. The first is that, of course, all your pressure is at the bottom. The weight of the water is pushing down, and the seam to take the most amount of pressure is at the bottom. My experience, the tanks that will leak more easily are the plexiglass tanks, particularly those that have seams that aren't fully molded. Plexiglass seams do seem to split. They can sometimes entirely split a whole side. I've only had that happen once or twice in 30 years. The glass tanks generally don't. The glass tanks, when you get a leak, it's usually going to be like you just see a little bit of water building up around the bottom of the tank, or you have a little puddle that's beginning below the tank someplace. The second reason for bottom cracks is that most of us put the tanks onto wood or onto racks or onto various things where the bottom is not perfectly true. So the bottom will get tweaked, the glass will get tweaked over time, and then the bottom will crack. That's really common, particularly if you've got like two pieces of wood and you've got the tank sitting over where the pieces of wood meet, and then the pieces of wood aren't entirely exactly straight with one another. Those kinds of things solve that problem. A lot of people, what they'll do is they buy like a 1/4 inch styrofoam, and then cut it to the footprint of the tanks, and then they put that piece of styrofoam on the wood racks or the shelf that they're going to place the tank on, and then the tank settles down and doesn't have any of those tweaking issues. Although myself, like most aquarists I know, are not organized enough to put that extra work into getting a tank seated properly. So there are ways that you can get around, things you can do. There are some assumptions you can make that, I can't do that or it's going to crack the bottom. Well, there are things you can do. And I'm going to show you a slide here. And on the top left, you will notice that this is the tank that I obtained from someone that had been previously drilled for a drain. So I had this hole in the bottom of the tank. So I thought, well, I can glue put a lot of silicone and glop it around a piece of tile, little 4x4 inch tile that I bought at Home Depot. And so I plopped it on there. It worked great. That particular tank's been working for many years that way. So I thought, well, okay, since that's a good way to seal the bottom of a tank, with a piece of tile and lots of silicone, then when I had a crack on the bottom of a tank and I didn't want to throw the tank away, such as the tank on the top right, you can probably do this then by putting pieces of tile on one side, glopping it down, and then filling up the spaces that aren't covered on the bottom side, which is what's happening on that tank on the right. That 20 long on the top picture on the right, yeah, it's always on my mind that I've got to replace that tank. It's been like that now for at least 6 years. It's never leaked. I don't recommend that you keep a tank like that for a long time. That was meant as a temporary situation, but it's worked out great, and that's probably next on the list to be replaced as soon as the tank gets replaced. But then, so there are some things you can do. You'll notice on the bottom of the pictures that I often have tanks sitting where they're not entirely covered on the bottom. Some people say, oh, the tank has to be covered on all four sides and all that. I don't find that to be the case. So you'll see I have a number of places in my fish rooms where the tank will stick out from a shelf a little bit, or it doesn't fit entirely. And then on this next picture coming up is something that you can certainly do, although it doesn't seem intuitive. But if you've got the two long sides of a tank covered, such as this tank sitting on 2x4s, it's still perfectly supported. The fact that it's not supported on the small sides doesn't really matter, and so you can get away with this without having any deals with the bottom cracking. But when you do get a crack, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the world. I mean, I shouldn't say that. When you do start seeing a leak, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. The problem with a leak is that all of a sudden, you're all of a sudden forced into some kind of a task you have to do right away. And what I do is I clean it up, get everything dry, so I can pinpoint exactly where the leak is coming from, get a gauge on how bad it is, and then usually I'll get it done within a day or 2 days to drain it down, empty it, and put a new tank in its place. Repairing tanks is not a big deal. You can go to Home Depot and pick up some of the silicone glue. I believe that makes a product that's aquarium safe. Yes, aquarium safe makes a difference. What aquarium safe is about is not only the fact that it's non-toxic to the fish, and that the gases and things that come off of it as it's curing and as it's drying are not toxic to fish or other animals in the aquarium, but also that it's of a viscosity that's a little bit easier to work with than regular silicone. If you get good quality silicone that's made specifically for aquariums, which the DAP silicone, it will do a great job on a 10-gallon, maybe even a 10-gallon or a 20-gallon tank. But when I start getting to bigger tanks, I go online and I buy better quality aquarium-made silicone. The difference is that the texture is really smooth. It doesn't hold bubbles and create bubbles like you'll get. It's going to tend to penetrate a little bit better than regular silicone. And of course, we all know that the worst thing you have happen when you redo a tank is to go ahead, put all the work into stripping out every last molecule of silicone from the bad tank, and then putting in a new bead of all new silicone, having it dry, and then having the tank still leak. Because then you have to do the whole process all over again because silicone doesn't stick to itself. So you want to get the best silicone you can and do the job right the first time when it happens. There's an old saying, you'll never become good at something you don't enjoy doing. And for one reason or another, I was the tank repair guy at CU. So I repaired many dozens of aquariums at CU, plus I had to repair a lot of tanks here. And I found that up to about 40 gallons, you can get away with some of the cheaper silicones. When you get into 55 gallons and up, then it starts a whole other ballgame where you possibly might want to consider having 1-inch, 1/8-inch strips of glass layered in along the edge to build up a platform that the silicone is held within, and it holds the sides of the tank and the bottom of the tank together. How this is done is explained more thoroughly at the website under repairing a leaking aquarium. But 55-gallon tanks, and above, start taking some special effort, and the success isn't always. Sometimes you have to do a tank more than once to get it to be totally leak free. But when a leak happens, you just go ahead, assess it, see what you're dealing with. If you've got fish you really care about in there, you probably want to get them out pretty soon. And then, of course, the faster you do the job and get it done and get the tank moved out, another one put in, the better it is for the fish, and the less likely that there will be any kind of a disaster. So anyway, I hope that basically answers some information, at least how we handle with leaking tanks here, which, as I say, it probably happens here about twice a year. And as a matter of fact, I just replaced a 40-gallon breeder that was leaking. I just replaced it yesterday. So it happens. It happens to all of us. And anyway, hope that answers the question.
Okay, Jerry writes, I want to breed the lucipinnis, and I heard that they were a cuckoo breeder. And if so, what cichlid should I use with them? Didn't you used to breed the multipunctata? I did used to breed the multipunctata, and the lucipinnis
is not a cuckoo breeder, actually. The multipunctata is. The lucipinnis is an egg scatterer, very similar to the petricola. And I can go into this a little bit further to explain what a cuckoo breeder is, because it's a very kind of a cool thing that this fish has developed the ability to do. And so anyway, we'll go to some video. This is the Synodontis multipunctata, at least as most people know it in the hobby. In fact, it's not a Synodontis multipunctata at all, as the true multipunctata is about 2 inches larger and is only rarely seen in the hobby. But at some point this fish, the Synodontis grandiops, came into the hobby and is now the fish that you take home from the fish store when you buy what you think is a Synodontis multipunctata. To keep things somewhat clear, I will refer to these as the multipunctata. I do not carry or breed these fish here any longer, and if you wanted to obtain them, they should be able to be obtained by your local fish store, and they can bring some in for you. Aside from that, you can see this is a much larger fish than the lucipinnis, and their claim to fame is that they are a parasitic cuckoo breeder. Now, this type of breeding is known in a couple of species of birds that will lay their eggs in the nest of another bird, who then hatches the eggs and raises up the young of the other bird. Often, as icing on the cake, the new young will then kick out the original young out of the nest. Well, this fish takes it one step further, and for those of you who name each of your fish and who treat each fry born in your aquarium as a new member of the family, this next story coming up may not be one you're going to want to hear. So the multipunctata catfish is from Lake Tanganyika and lives around a number of mouth-brooding cichlids, a couple species that over millennia the Synodontis has developed a relationship with. Here it's the Tenochromis horii, one of the most common species that the multipunctata chooses to breed with in the wild. Unfortunately, this cichlid is not commonly available in the hobby, though it is very pretty because it's one mean and very nasty fish. The catfish watches the cichlids, and when the cichlids spawn, the female lays her eggs in the water column and the male fertilizes them, and the female then catches them in her mouth and then keeps them there, raising them up until they are free swimming and ready to go out on their own. The female never eats anything during this whole process. The catfish knows when this is starting, and when the time comes, the catfish time and deposit their own fertilized eggs and put them in with the group of cichlid eggs as they are being fertilized, and both of them are taken into the mouth of the female cichlid to be raised up. Here's when things start to get interesting. The catfish fry, which are much larger, hatch a day before the cichlid fry do, and when the catfish hatch, well, they chow down. Once they have worked their way through the cichlid eggs and fry in the mouth of the mother cichlid, they then start eating one another. And if you are spotting them yourself, you will want to strip the fry from the mouth of the female cichlid and separate the two very different looking eggs from one another, and then hatch them separately, usually in a tumbler. If you wait too long, you'll end up with just multipunctata fry, and if you wait much too long, you will end up with just one or two very large multipunctata fry. The multipunctata young are really amazing to grow out as well. You will not see young that are more voracious and cannibalistic than these guys. They will literally double in size every day for the first 1 to 2 weeks, and they will eat everything and everyone that they can get into their mouths. The Synodontis lucipinnis are not this way at all, and though they can be tough on one another, the adults can be tough on one another when they're breeding. And there are some that believe that the lucipinnis can be cannibalistic as young when they are very small, which I haven't seen and I'm beginning to doubt. The lucipinnis generally get along quite well, and you never see the occasional fin and body damage that the multipunctatas will often inflict on one another and that you'll sometimes see. The lucipinnis generally get together and get along really well. Thank you very much for watching this video on the Synodontis lucipinnis, and the next one is going to be on how to create and make the water change system that I have here for 1 tank or 200, whatever you like. We'll go ahead and we'll build a drain setup, and I'll show you how it works, and we'll talk about all of that next video that'll be out in about 2 weeks. So, and also of course the questions from customers. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. If you have a question you'd like to see answered here on live bears or breeding Odessa barbs or any of the fish that I have here at Select Aquatics, please email it to me at selectaquatics@gmail.com, and I'll use it here if I can. The stranger the better. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.